This is. Oh no, this is. I thought this was from Guys and Dolls. This is the Frank Sinatra song, High Hopes.
Yes.
This is from that movie with that little kid Eddie Hodges, who's now 85 years old. Little Eddie Hodges.
Little Eddie Hodges.
All right, Andy Beyer joins us now, the great Andy Beyer, as we have the opportunity for the first time since affirmed, I think, in 1978, to have a Triple Crown winner. It's impossible to talk about this on PTI because Wilbon just won't. He just says horsey, 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 and he doesn't care, and he claims everything is a fraud, and so the show is off limits for anything about the Belmont, which is a shame. Let me start with some sort of very general questions before we get to the critical question, which is the oddity of the number 2 spot in the draw not yielding any Belmont winners in 20 years. Is that
Tony? It's just a quirk. I
Okay.
mean, there are a half dozen real serious handicapping issues in this race. This is not one of them.
Okay, so we'll eliminate that, and then we'll get to traditionally the field is winnowed by the time you get to the Belmont. There's as few as 5, 6, 7 horses in the Belmont. How many horses this time?
There are 11 this time, and what's happened in recent years is that the Belmont has produced a string of just unbelievable results. I mean, 50-1 shots, 30-1 shots that on paper had no chance. So I think everybody with an ambulatory 3-year-old looks at this history and says, gee, why not? Let's take a shot at it.
How many, and this is another critical question, I think, for California Chrome, again, traditionally in the Belmont, the horses ran the Derby and they ran the Preakness and they ran the Belmont. I've noticed a couple of names there that skipped the Preakness. How many fresh horses as opposed to California Chrome?
Well, there are plenty, and you raise a good issue. Back in the old days, horses did this without batting an eye. In fact, in the 60s and 70s, sometimes a horse would have a race in between the Preakness and the Belmont, just to keep them sharp. Now, this is a really tough grind for modern horses, and I mean, in the last 12 years, only one horse has run in the Derby and the Preakness and has been able to win the Belmont. The majority of the winners are ones who ran in the Derby, skipped the middle leg, and came into the Belmont, with a 5-week rest, and that seems to be the winning strategy these days.
You know about these sorts of things. In baseball, within the last few weeks, there's story after story after story about pitchers at such early ages needing Tommy John surgery. And people our age go, well, what about Don Newcomb and Warren Spahn and Robin Roberts? And nothing ever happened to their arms. Is there a similar circumstance with horses now that they are not being bred? They're not as durable, not as tough, not as ready to go as they used to be.
Absolutely. And,
why?
One could write a long dissertation on some of the reasons, but people have, the industry has been less judicious in breeding the horses with an eye toward stamina and durability. I mean, everybody just wants fast, precocious horses, and you could say that the liberal use of medications in racing, has been a big factor too. That everybody gets Lasix now, and Lasix is a diuretic, and horses lose a lot of weight when they after taking Lasix, and it seems it takes something out of them. They need more time to recover. So there are a lot of theories about it, but it's a fact that horses are not as robust as they were in the old days.
Big races don't change. In other words, if a race is a mile, it's a mile in 1950, and it's a mile in 2014. The Belmont's been a mile and a half forever and ever and ever. Are there less important races at this distance, so it's easier to breed a horse for speed and, as opposed to duration?
Well, as I wrote earlier this week, American racing has a lot of, major races have been shortened over the years.
Oh, they have. I didn't know that.
And like the Jockey Club Gold Cup, which used to be one of the premier race for older horses. Years ago, it was 2 miles. Then it was 1.5 miles. And then in 1990, they made it 1.25 miles. The Belmont is the only consequential race on dirt at 1.5 miles in the United States.
So you don't really have to breed horses to run it if they don't have to run it.
And nobody does anymore. In fact, if in the breeding in the breeding industry, if a horse wins at 1.5 miles in the Belmont, the breeders kind of look askance, like say, "Oh, this horse maybe not have enough precocity. I mean, we don't want these long-winded pedigrees." The winner of the 2000 Belmont, a horse named Daterra, he couldn't find any, he couldn't find a home as a stallion in the United States. He's gone to stud in Venezuela.
Wow. All right, let's get to the breeding issues. When you wrote about California Chrome before the Derby, you said that his breeding wasn't going to let him, you didn't think he was going to let him win the Derby. Won the Derby, he won the Preakness. Is there anything in his breeding that shows you that the Belmont is within his grasp, or does his breeding, which he's overcome twice already, does his breeding indicate it is not within his grasp?
Maybe it's kind of irrelevant because he is so outrun his pedigree.
Yeah.
He wasn't supposed to, on paper, he wasn't supposed to go 1.25 miles. The pedigree's not going to help him, but maybe it's irrelevant. But I think if you look at the Derby and the Preakness, and just the way they were run, I mean, in the Derby, he was clearly slowing down at the end. I mean, in the Preakness, he was he was hard used, to in the stretch, to maintain, a 1.5 length advantage.
And that's a shorter race than the Derby.
Yeah, over a horse who'd like never won a stakes race. So, I mean, people talk about his Derby and Preakness wins as if, he was crushing the field. I mean, CBS last night said, well, California Chrome ran away with the Kentucky and Derby and the Preakness. He won by 1.5 lengths and 1 3/4 lengths, and he wasn't pulling away. So to me, these were not the runaway performances that you say, boy, this horse is just going to crush him at 1.5 miles. I think the distance is a huge issue for him.
Has he convinced you of anything, though, by at least winning both races?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is a very good horse, and he's, he's a horse who can he's got speed and he's got maneuverability. He can make his own breaks. I mean, he's had by far the top Beyer speed figures of all these horses. I'm no California Chrome knocker, but I really think that he's going to meet his Waterloo when he turns into that long Belmont stretch on Saturday.
So you don't think he's going to win?
I don't think he'll be in the money. No.
Really, you think he'll just fade out at that?
Here's my reasoning. We've seen Belmonts where horses were like overwhelmingly superior by their margins of victory. I mean, who'd won the Preakness by like 10 lengths,
right.
Or which was the case of Smarty Jones. California Chrome, he's about 2 lengths better than his main rivals. Well, that's not a lot of margin for error, considering he had perfect racing luck in both of those races. Now you've got the third race in 5 weeks is an unknown, and you've got the definite question mark of the 1.5 miles, where he's going up against 4 horses who kind of look on paper and on their pedigree like they're better suited to 1.5 miles than he is.
Okay, give us the order of finish as far as you see it.
Wicked Strong, my Kentucky Derby selection, had a really tough trip in the Derby from post position 19. He's now been rested since the Derby, training well. I think he's extremely formidable. I'm picking him on top. There's a new shooter, lightly raced, named Tonalist. Excellent trainer, sensational pedigree. Just won a prep race at Belmont. I mean, he's the fresh face in the field. I pick him second. And then you've got Ride on Curlin and Commanding Curve, who were second to California Chrome in the other two races. I mean, they were both finishing well in there. I think any of these horses can win and turn the tables on California Chrome.
So I'm
rooting for California Chrome.
Right.
I think it'll be it's going to be a great story, but I have to bet against.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. You have no idea what a pleasure it is to have you on before these races.
Get me on PTI. Tell Belmont there are going to be 130,000 screaming people, at a live sports event in New York. I mean, you're talking about the Stanley Cup every day, which about 17 people watch. So.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, Tony.
Andy Beyer, the great Andy Beyer, picking against California Chrome, but not picking Nimrod. Sorry to say, not picking Nimrod.
Seems like a slight.
Isn't he great? I mean,
I can't tell you what a huge kick it is for me to listen to him because he knows so much.
He's
incredible.
He's
Every
great.
little gnat of a detail of this he knows.
Love to have him on. We will take a